Joining me today is retired Colonel Clint Granger. He served in the Vietnam War twice. Clint, we've had the conversation about sort of your last trip to Vietnam in '75 and the chaos that was there that you witnessed. I want to go back to sort of your first tour in Vietnam. When was that? 66?
66, 67.
What was it like then? And I want to sort of contrast the American involvement then, the Vietnamese military then, with the last days.
Radical contrast. When we first went in, the South Vietnamese military was not very effective at all. It was a political machine as much as a military machine. And then not well equipped, not well trained, and not too well motivated. Later on, of course, they do it pretty well. We equipped them, we provided ammunition, we provided artillery, and we provided what they needed. I suppose if you compare that period in the beginning with at the end, I can only explain, well, we had given them tanks, we'd given them fighter airplanes, we'd been giving them all kinds of high-tech stuff. We didn't give them spare parts, we didn't give them money, we didn't give them fuel, we didn't give them ammunition. I can remember from my own experience, I'd call artillery in and not hesitate to call for hundreds of rounds in an area that I thought would be useful. At the end, the South Vietnamese were limited to 1 round per artillery piece per day. That's all they had.
And so the North Vietnamese were streaming across the border. They didn't have the tools.
They were coming across the border well-trained, and it's a different bunch. Yeah. Remember, by the end of the war, another generation had come along, been trained, and they were fresh.
So back to the beginning, you were there before the Tet Offensive.
Yes.
The Tet Offensive, ultimately the U.S. won.
Yes, technically.
But most historians would say that signaled, at least in the United States, that this wasn't a winnable war.
I suppose that's a fair statement. Who would decide such a thing? When is a war winnable and not winnable?
Well, that's my question for you.
Okay. For the United States, unlike most countries, the war is winnable only when it has public support, and this one did not. Americans didn't. We'd lost 58,000 troops killed, and God knows how many wounded, crippled for life, and what have you. That's a rather terrifying number. Nothing like World War II, where we went into many, many more dead. But 58,000, that's the population of a major city, gone. And 10 times that number wounded. Too many people.
What was morale like for the troops in Vietnam during that period?
Only moderately fair. It was a mixed army, half draftees, half regulars, and so on. And people did their very best, and they were good soldiers, but they didn't want to be there. It depended on what you were supposed to be doing. If you were sitting in Saigon playing shuffling paper somehow or other, well, you get through your tour, 13 months, you go home. If you're sitting in an infantry battalion, infantry losses, well, I had an infantry battalion for 6 months. A battalion at that time was 800 people. I lost 400. So 88 dead, the rest wounded.
So it was a traumatically different experience where you were. Is there something about the Tet that sort of you want to share that would be different, or would change how we look at that? And Westmoreland quit right afterwards.
Yeah. We knew all about Tet. We had some pre-warnings on it. We didn't know quite how, but we captured some people and found documents. Indeed, one of my helicopter units found people looking at one of our positions and killed them and found their battle plan. So we knew what might happen, but we didn't know quite how, or we didn't know the timing.
All right, and you just mentioned time again. We're out of time in this segment.